How are you guys doing? Today is Wednesday, September 8th, 2021. I'm James Sims, and for this episode of The Elite, I'm going to do an elite individual profile on Za'Darius Smith. The elite outside linebacker for the Green Bay Packers turns 29 today, and my intent with this piece is to shine light on what he's been able to accomplish and achieve from the moments where the spotlights first hit him at Kentucky, even before that at East Mississippi Community College, and up to where he is now as a two-time Pro Bowler and very possibly looking at more. Just looking at the type of player that he's been, he was a player that definitely was overlooked at Baltimore, even though he led the team in sacks for a year, but he went on to Green Bay where he was actually given the reps and the time to really take in and hone his craft, to which he was able to become a sort of boogeyman in the NFC North within that division. Since he and Preston Smith arrived in Green Bay's actually had a good enough defense to help Aaron Rodgers out at least somewhat, to have really good records, to help the Packers have really, really good seasons over the last couple of years. I think Za'Darius Smith has been very instrumental in the Packers turnaround, and I think he's a very big part of the reason why Aaron Rodgers elected to come back. If he had no defense, I don't think he would have come back. So just looking into the type of player he is, he stands at about 6'4", 272. I guess you'd really describe him as a versatile Swiss Army knife along the line, because he is more of like an outside linebacker than a defensive end, but he can still lead your team in sacks. He originally came out of Montgomery, Alabama, and like I said, he would end up playing 2 years of college football at East Mississippi Community College before transferring to the University of Kentucky. In his junior year at Kentucky, he would go on to play all 12 of the games he would play in a season where Kentucky would go on to finish with a 2-10 record in Mark Stoops' first year as the coach. In that season itself, Za'Darius would finish with 59 total tackles, 6.5 sacks on the season, also a fumble recovery as well. And this would lead into his next season, where as a senior, he would play 12 games for a 5-7 Kentucky team. They won 3 more games in the previous season. Za'Darius had 60 tackles, just like he did the previous season, just sitting on about 4.5 sacks, a pass defended, a fumble recovery as well. Following his 2 seasons at Kentucky, he would establish himself as a good enough prospect to be taken in the 4th round with the 122nd overall pick in the 2015 draft. Just for reference, just to look at the players that were taken in that draft. Amari Cooper was taken in that draft, Todd Gurley, Melvin Gordon, Marcus Peters, making up the players in the first round, just for a little bit of background. But looking at what Za'Darius Smith did, he was drafted to play for the Baltimore Ravens, and that was the very first team that he would play for. In his very first season with Baltimore in 2015, he didn't start any of the games, but he would play 15 games in a season where the Ravens would go on to finish with a 5-11 record. This was the year after they lost to the Patriots. They missed the playoffs completely, and this would be Jim Harbaugh's 6th season as the head coach, or the 8th season as the head coach. In Za'Darius Smith's first season, he would finish with 30 tackles and 5.5 sacks, despite not really starting, finishing with 7 tackles for a loss. Following that season, he would come back to Baltimore for his age 24 season in 2016. He would start 4 of the 13 games he would play in his sophomore season at Baltimore. And in his second season, he would play 13 games in a season where the Ravens finished with an 8-8 record. They won 3 more games in the previous season, but completely missed the playoffs again. Za'Darius Smith would finish with 20 tackles this season compared to 30 the previous year. He only had 1 sack on the year, 4 tackles for a loss, so it was more of a setback than the year before. His third year in Baltimore would be his age 25 season in 2017. He would start 4 of the 14 games he would play in a season where the Baltimore Ravens would finish with a 9-7 record, missing the playoffs for the 3rd consecutive year. He would finish with 24 tackles on the season and 3.5 sacks, neither of which were career highs. At that time, he was a very solid rotational piece for a very solid Baltimore Ravens offense or defense. defense. Following that year, this would lead to his final season with the Baltimore Ravens. In 2018, in his age 26 season, he would start only 8 of the 16 games he would play for a Baltimore Ravens team that would finish with a 10-6 record. They would end up making the playoffs this year. In his very first playoff season, Za'Darius Smith would finish with 45 tackles on the year, finishing with 8.5 sacks on the year, which led the Ravens in sacks. He would finish with a forced fumble. This would be the third season he forced a fumble. He would finish with 10 tackles for loss, the first time he finished with double-digit tackles for loss. And at the conclusion of the season, the Ravens would end up losing in the wild card to the Chargers. This is the year where Lamar Jackson took over the starting spot in the middle of the year and was able to help the Ravens clinch the playoffs for the first time since 2014. And then, like I said, they would end up losing to the Chargers in the wild card game. But following this season, Za'Darius Smith would end up going and signing a 4-year, $66 million deal with the Green Bay Packers. And ever since he's been on the Green Bay Packers, he started all 32 games in both seasons. In his very first season in Green Bay, in his age 27 season, he would start all 16 games for a Green Bay Packers side that would finish with a 13-3 record. This would be the best record the Packers posted since 2011 when Aaron Rodgers won his first MVP. But in this season, Za'Darius Smith would go on to finish with 55 combined tackles in his first season as a starter, the most he's ever put up in a season to date. He would finish with 17 tackles for loss, also the most tackles for loss he's put up to date. He finished with 13.5 sacks, the first time he's ever put up double-digit sacks, and 13.5 sacks is the most sacks he's ever put up to date. In 2019, he would end up being named a Pro Bowler for the very first time in his NFL career. And then once the Packers would make the playoffs, they would end up beating the Seahawks in the divisional round before losing in the NFC Championship to the 49ers, who would eventually lose to the Kansas City Chiefs in the Super Bowl that year. Following his first Pro Bowl season, Za'Darius Smith would come back to the Green Bay Packers for his second season there, this most recent 2020 season, which was impacted by COVID in the sense where there were no fans in the stands, but the season was able to continue as it did. But they still had to go through a lot of COVID testing and a lot of COVID protocol as well. In his most recent 2020 season, Za'Darius Smith would start all 16 games for the second year in a row in a season where the Green Bay Packers would finish with a 13-3 record for the second year in a row, and this being Aaron Rodgers' third MVP season, this most recent season, and Matt LaFleur's second year as head coach. In Za'Darius Smith's most recent season, he will go on to finish with 52 combined tackles, doing what he did before, just 3 less tackles than before. He had 12 tackles for loss. He finished with 12.5 sacks on the season, second straight season in which he's had double-digit sacks, alongside 4 forced fumbles and 2 fumble recoveries. This is the first time he's ever recorded more than 1 forced fumble, and the first time he's ever recovered a fumble at all. At the conclusion of the season, Za'Darius Smith was named a Pro Bowler for the second consecutive year, and he was named to the second team All-Pro for the very first time in his NFL career. So that's the first All-Pro team he's ever made. And once the Packers made it into the playoffs, they would end up beating the Rams in the divisional round just to lose to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and Tom Brady in the NFC Championship, as the Tampa Bay Buccaneers would eventually go on to win the Super Bowl. But that pretty much leads us to where we are with Za'Darius Smith, as today he turns 29, as literally right over the horizon on Sunday, he will begin his 2021 NFL season as the Green Bay Packers take on the New Orleans Saints in Jacksonville because of Hurricane Ida. But of course, this is going to be a very big game, as this may be the start of what could possibly be his third straight Pro Bowl season, but at the same time, we don't know. I like doing these episodes because it's very possible that next year he could add so much more to his resume, but I think that's just the fun of going through this year by year. I want to thank the College and Pro Football Reference databases for giving me the stats and figures that I needed for this, along with the Wikipedia pages I needed for the teams that he played for. I also want to thank the ESPN and NFL websites for giving me what I needed as well. I want to first take this time to wish Za'Darius Smith a happy 29th birthday. If you ever get a chance to watch him, he's wearing number 55 for the Green Bay Packers. And he even has a couple segments on the NFL Top 100 show. And with that said, last but not least, I want to thank everyone for listening to all 10, 11 minutes of this piece. I once again hope all is well. Once all of today's exhibitions and matchups are done, I will come back with another episode regarding what went down yesterday or what's going down today as we look at what's going on tomorrow in the world of sports. And hopefully by this time next year, by Za'Darius Smith's 30th birthday, I'll have more to say on Za'Darius Smith. But with that said, thanks once again for listening to this piece. I hope all is well. Once again, today is Wednesday, September 8th, 2021. I'm James Sims. Thanks for listening to my piece, and peace out. I'll catch you with another episode right after this.